Good morning and welcome to the Haven Tree Parent Family Podcast, where we get a minute to talk about something that's important to us and hopefully yourself before the kids wake up.
Today's special guest is Cleo. Cleo is a little tiny girl. She is 8 weeks old, if you can believe that. She's a little bitty thing. I was having a hard time believing it yesterday when I weighed her, but she's a very sweet little girl. Cleo is joining us today to talk about ways that we parent with grace.
So yeah, like I said, we're going to talk about parenting with grace, and I think you have the points put together for this one, so
Yeah.
I will have my responses well rehearsed.
So I think parenting with grace, if you have a belief system similar to ours, I think that this topic may be a little bit easier to understand. But really, when I think about parenting with grace, to me that means trying to parent our kids the way that God interacts with us. And so if you're not someone that is particularly religious, that concept may be a little bit strange. Or if you think of God as being, like not involved or an angry guy up there, that may be kind of a strange way to describe it. But that's, I think, for us, sort of the way that is easiest to describe the way we sort of think about that. And it just has to do with, if we say we think that, God is our father, right, then we should take that example and implement it with our kids, because presumably he would be the best example of a father, right? So it would be logical to take his example in that. And that's hard, I think, sometimes, but showing that grace, in my opinion, is a big part of that and is something that we try to implement. So with that in mind, there's just kind of a few things that specifically we really try to focus on that we wanted to talk about today. So I think the first is setting clear boundaries. And this is something we'll also talk about in our other podcast this week. But I think it's really important that we have clear expectations and that the kids kind of understand that. So like in our house, the big things are obedience and honesty. And those are probably pretty universal as far as like things that parents find to be important. But, the kids know that for those two behaviors, there's a very specific consequence, and to go outside of, to lie is not acceptable, and like in our house, it sort of is something we often say is, are you going to lie and get a big consequence, or are you going to choose to tell the truth and have a smaller consequence? And then, the challenge is obviously if that's what you say, you better make sure that you hold up to that, right? Because if they tell you the truth and it's a mess of something that just like you weren't expecting, you still have to hold up sort of that promise or that agreement of it's a lesser consequence than whatever the lie is. But in our house, that's something that is very important to us because we want to be able to have that trust. And when they're teenagers, we want them to come to us and tell us that they did something stupid, because teenagers,
Right.
The way that their brains work, they tend to do things that are stupid. And that's not a like teenagers are terrible. That's just their brains are, broken, and they
Right.
have a lot of hormones and
Right.
things happening.
Because, the saying is that, truth will set you free, but then if truth puts you in timeout, you're like, what? Why did I tell the truth? And then next time you're not going to get that.
Yeah.
So you better have a good reaction response ready for...
So, yeah. So I think...
Not that the kids are saying, like, well, the truth sets me free. So
yeah,
they're not saying that to us, but it's, it's just the saying that's out there. So,
but it is something that to us, they've heard that enough now, and they still have that instinct to hide their mistake or their bad choice, because they know, like, I should not have smacked my sister. So it's like, why is Kenzie crying? I don't know.
what just happened 5 seconds ago?
Are you sure? Yeah. So, so there still is that instinct, I think, that's we're constantly having to address. But having those clear boundaries of like, this is what the expectation is, this is what's allowed, this is what's not allowed, and being consistent with that. We let our kids be pretty loud and pretty rambunctious in the house. We wrestle in the living room with them, and we like to roughhouse and get down on the floor and be silly with them.
Yeah. I just lay there and let them like crawl all over me, and I'll throw them on the couch, and it's all good and fun. But
so like in our house, that's very much allowed to be, treating the furniture like playground equipment or whatever. But then
when they're doing gymnastics on the back of it and trying to do a flip by themselves, it's.
But then if I say it's time to be done, I expect them to respond right away, right? Like, so you guys get your wiggles out, but be respectful and obedient.
And what's your saying for responding right away?
Oh, I say, how do we obey? We obey right away, all the way.
Which I just think is a fun statement. That's why I had her say it, because I like hearing it.
Yeah, because I get a lot of like, just a minute. No, how do we obey? We obey right away, all the way.
So it's become a very,
it's
very scripted. It's become a very scripted thing for her.
Yeah.
But it's good. I love it. I mean, I enjoy hearing it. So
it rhymes. It's something that the kids will
it's flowy, and they'll probably say it. In
they'll
20
hear
years.
it in their heads until they die. Like they, like,
Mom always said that.
Yeah, but I think the second thing about parenting with grace is recognizing the individuality of the child. This I think is really, really important. But there's also a very fine balance.
Because none of your kids will respond to the same situation the same way, at least emotionally wise. Like we have a nice variety of. Yeah,
with 5, there's
we have a nice variety of. We have the challenger that wants to say, "Well, this is why I'm not really in trouble, but this is what happened." Then we have the like slink away and like disappear into the darkness of wherever they want to go. And then we have the very much like, I'm angry at you and I'm going to go slam a door type of reaction. So so we have the full mix of, I'd hope there's not another type, and who knows what our littlest will become. But
whiny.
Everybody, each kid reacts differently when they're in that grace period of you're in trouble for this activity. So.
Yeah. So I would say, I think what's important is keeping the expectations the same, or the rules or the boundaries.
Right. It doesn't matter age, boy, girl, whatever. The response is all.
But the way that you respond to that may be different depending on the child. And we even, we wrestled with it some, but kind of came to that conclusion even when Kenzie was first diagnosed. It was sort of a, like, how do you discipline a kid with cancer? Like,
I think I told that to my cousin. He was like, what? You just give her ice cream. You're a monster for doing anything else.
For her ever being in trouble.
But she has to be a member of society when she does grow up. So,
right.
You can't let her get away with everything because she has XYZ circumstances. I mean, it is a horrible position to have to be in because you don't want to have to correct someone.
And you still the way that you respond is different, and you understand. I think especially in that particular circumstance, you understand that like that child may be really struggling with a loss of control, and so you may give more grace in the way that you respond when they're behaving to try to grasp control, right? Because you understand where that's coming from. But I think that, still the idea of these are the expectations in this house. I understand why you're choosing to disobey, but that's still not what we do. I think a really easy example is if your kid was up late last night, the next day they're going to be cranky. Like that's the way it works, right? So the next day they're cranky because they're tired, but they're still not allowed to smack their sibling, right? Like it's just not acceptable to smack your sibling, period. Even if I agree with why you smacked them because they were being annoying, right? Whatever, it's not acceptable.
Yeah, but the confusing thing is like they do confusing things. Like you're trying to correct one kid and the other kid's trying to do the same thing, or just like jumps right into it and like we just told the other one not to do this. Why would you jump in and do the exact same thing?
Yeah.
Like, stop standing on the table or whatever it is.
Right.
Like, don't climb on the table after we told them to get off.
Like I'm in the middle of telling the other one what the consequences for doing
they're
this,
currently
and
in
now
timeout.
you're doing it. But anyway, the punishment, I think, for smacking a sibling is going to be different if I know that they were up late last night. Like, instead the punishment maybe, you know what, you have to go and lay down for 10 minutes because inevitably they're going to fall asleep.
And yesterday.
And then it will be okay. Now, it still feels like punishment to them, but, there's a different sort of response to that. Or like,
well, you're giving them a minute to cool down and rethink and regroup themselves. So it's like, okay, I want to be nicer to my sisters.
Yeah. Well, and then, too, I think some of the kids, it sort of is like with some of the kids, I can just like look at them sternly and they just crumble. Like, I'm sorry, I will never ever do this again. Right. And then unfortunately, we don't have more kids like that. Most of our kids are not quite that tender-hearted. Maybe Kenzie. Kenzie's probably the most that as far as getting into trouble. But
but then she comes up to you and just like, I'm angry at you.
Yeah, but
you didn't give me more juice or whatever.
Yeah, but her response being angry is, I'm angry at you and I am never ever giving you any more smooches again. And it's like, oh, no more smooches. What about hugs? No. What about snuggles? Just a few. Right. Like Kenzie's, she's kind of a silly one, but so I think regardless of the child's circumstances, you can still hold, or age even, you can still hold the same expectations, but then the consequence or the response may be different, so, and this, like I said, for ages, it could be like, in our house, we obey, but if you have a younger child, they get 3 warnings instead of 1 warning. Or whatever the case may be. And I think the other part that makes this a little bit easier, I mean, I know our kids talk to each other, but to go up in the bedroom to deal with whatever that consequence is a much...
Or just separate from the environment of the playroom or wherever they're playing. Like that way they're separated from all the other activity and you can actually focus on a conversation and say like, listen, we love you. We're sorry you did a bad thing. This is how we don't do that.
This is the consequence.
And you're going to have to go back and sit in timeout or
whatever. Yeah. Lose a privilege, do extra chores.
Right. And go tell your sibling sorry and apologize and make sure it's, not just like, hey, I'm sorry, here's a high five.
So, but to deal with them, differently and in a way that's appropriate for them, sort of for us, always the first step in discipline is, excuse me, that was not appropriate. You need to go up to my bedroom. Right. And that's like, they know that they're getting in trouble, right? Whatever that means for that particular action, that particular behavior, and that particular child, everybody, you need to go up to my bedroom. When they were younger, it was, they didn't obey with that. So you would have to hold their hand or carry them up to the bedroom. Mm-hmm. Like your 2-year-old is not going to go to the bedroom to receive punishment willingly, right?
There's been times where like you'll hear them go upstairs, but then they're like hiding in another room.
Like find them in a closet.
What are you doing in the closet with a blanket over your head? We're not playing hide and seek. We're going to talk to you about what you did.
So, but that's kind of a good way too, to like, even the kids can kind of see, and we've had conversations like Adri's asked before, like, well, why does Kenzie get this punishment when she does this versus that punishment, and so we've had to kind of have conversations about that, while also saying, really, it's not your business either.
Right.
But
they're not the parent, but I mean, they can, not that they can't know,
right.
why it's responded differently, but.
Right. And so we kind of deal with it both ways of saying like, this is why, and so you have to kind of have logic and reason behind, your choices.
A 3-year-old doesn't understand as much as an 8-year-old does.
Right. So. And I think, there's nothing wrong with like giving that appropriate answer, but then also kind of reinforcing, what, like, it's okay that you asked this question, but it's also really, because it's not her business. Like, if we go back to the example of like trying to be like God and give grace, like, what spiritual thing you're dealing with may not be my business. Right. And so that's something that, they're still little and they don't necessarily understand that fully, but just kind of also reinforcing like, you know, when I go upstairs and have a private conversation with Kenzie about Kenzie's choice, that's between me and Kenzie. So, you know, there's something kind of be said for that too, but also trying to answer her questions is important. The next, because we've talked a lot about this particular topic.
Sorry. 20 minutes on one point. Go.
Yeah, you know, is to have certain goals. This is something that I think probably we first heard from a couple at our church that I love and respect very much. And we had kind of done it, but our kids were still very little at the time. So it wasn't something that we necessarily were doing intentionally. It was just kind of something that we happen to be doing sometimes. So having certain goals for your kids, I think is a really great exercise. I think it's a great way to like sit down with your spouse and talk about like what it is you're seeing with your child and what things you want to work on with them, right? And I think it goes both ways as far as like things that you want to grow in them and things that you want to kind of address or trim or prune or whatever, you know, however you want to think about that.
Right, because you're going through phases with your kids as well. Yeah. Like, you know, I think I heard somebody say once, like, your kids, when you're a kid, you don't realize at the time that you're growing up, that your parents are also growing up still yeah. too. Yeah. And, you know, I thought that was a great saying because I was just like, yeah, we are still growing with them in just our, experiences and knowing how to raise a 7-year-old for the first time.
Right.
So, you know, and they don't see that we're still learning and growing into that. They just think, oh, it's mom and dad. And we have whatever grandiose idea of us in their brain, which I hope is good. But so, you know, just have that in mind too, that we're all growing in whatever situation we're facing and finding those times of.
So I think sitting down then, you know, and thinking about like, I really appreciate, so like our star chart almost, the way that we use it now is kind of born out of seeing Saya in particular start to really go out of his way. So another kind of saying that we have is see a problem, fix a problem, or ask for help, you know? And so sort of that idea of like, you don't just walk over. Like the other day I was going up the stairs and there's a piece of celery on the stairs.
She hates celery. It's her number one vegetable enemy.
I hate celery anyway. It smells weird and gross. I don't like it.
The one thing she will not eat.
We're going to move off of this topic because I'll get very... like, I talk about my hate trait for celery for 10 minutes.
Josh hates tomatoes.
Anyway. But there's a piece of celery. Just one lonely celery stick. And it was like a big celery stick. It wasn't like a little piece. It looked like somebody like pulled it out of a garden or something. Not that we have celery growing yet. But, you know, this giant celery stick on the stairs. Why? Like, I know that I had sent the kids up and down the stairs several times. Like, take your socks upstairs. You need to bring down your laundry. Like, the kids easily, all 3 big kids had walked past it twice. And there was still a celery stick on the stairs. And I know which kid did it and when they took it upstairs because I had told them to put it down before they went up the stairs. And they decided to put it down on the stairs instead of before going up the stairs.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like a Jamie or Kenzie sort of situation.
Like, come on, right? So, but anyway, Josiah started all of a sudden trying to identify things that need to be done around the house, and he just kind of started like he'd just take out the garbage, and it was very sweet, you know, or like, he started like being Kenzie's little buddy, and it would be like Kenzie would need something, he would say like, I'll go and help you. You know, and so I found myself saying, like, Josiah, like, I really appreciate that. You are being such a gentleman, you know. Yeah. And so...
Well, he's all of the... he knows everybody's processes. Like, he knows all of the... when things are going to happen or how they're going to happen. Like, he has a good understanding of how, like, our day is organized. And so, like, when he sees things out of place, it's very good for him to, like... he's going to be the one that's obviously picking up on what's wrong first.
And so, you know, we sort of started to recognize him doing this. And so we wanted to continue to nurture that trait, right? And to continue to encourage that characteristic. And then on the flip side of that, you know, we were just talking the other day, this is kind of a silly example, but Jamie all of a sudden has become like a daredevil, like crazy bananas things, right? Like Kenzie's always kind of been the daredevil to like do what the other kids are afraid to do. Our kids are all very physical. I would say of them, generally, Jamie tends to be the least so. She struggles a little bit more to plan sort of what she wants her body to do. You know, in school, she gets PT and OT, particularly because of that, that she has trouble with motor planning. And so she tends to be much more accident prone in general, because she just isn't really aware of where she is in relationship to other things. But she also tends to be much more cautious because I think she knows that. And so to see her all of a sudden, like we were outside playing the other day, she's like climbing on top of the swing set roof. Like, I'm like, so I said, Jay, can you please get down? Like, this was like the third or fourth thing that she had done that was just like a little bananas. And I'm like, Jay, could you please get down? Because if you fall and crack your head open like a watermelon and your brains are all over, it's not going to be very cute.
Yeah.
Like, what, you know, and so it's kind of a conversation we had of like, I'm not really sure if this daredevil behavior is like a new confidence that she's more capable. If so, like, that's great. Or if it's like an attempt, because then like she's also one that if she has a scratch that's like 3 weeks old, she'll be like, oh, I have an owie. And you're like, yes, right. That's almost healed. Go. You're fine.
That's from 2 weeks ago. You know,
right.
You almost need to like label each one of her like scratches so you can show her the dates on there. Like,
initial
this one says February. So
yeah.
Please stop bringing it up in June.
You know, so it sort of is like, is this an attention-seeking behavior or is this confidence, right? Because if this is an attention-seeking behavior, we need to figure out why she's feeling like she's not getting the attention she needs. And if it's confidence, we need to nurture it in a safer way. You know, so, but I think it's really important to set goals.
Yeah.
I think the next thing is to major on the majors, not the minors. This is really easy, I think. You know, this has to do, like, kind of like we said earlier, like, it's important to think about the big things. We don't lie. We don't steal. We don't cheat. We obey. We are respectful. And those things, you know, however you deal with them in your house, those are big things, right? But then things like you left the toothpaste cap off the toothpaste. Like there's still
leaving doors open. That's right. my
Josh
like,
gets crazy about that.
Why is this door left open? Like I come in and there's a screen door, a bathroom door, and you know, I'm like, the cats could be outside right now. Please, bugs are coming in. You know.
And there are a lot of things like that are small things that make you crazy as a parent, right? That just like get your goat, make you feel like a crazy person, like you're living with hooligans or, you know, feral caveman people that, you know, whatever. Like,
right.
I've had many of these thoughts while finding celery on the stairs, right? Like, but those are not big deals.
Right.
Now, if a child is consistently leaving out their shoes in a blatant attempt to just be disrespectful, that may be a different sort of situation, but I think typically kids aren't quite that kids don't, I don't think, typically think through things like that until they're like a little older, and even then not usually. So even though it feels like a personal attack that they're leaving out their, you know, whatever multiple times a day, usually that's not the case, right? And so things like that, I think, you know, those are the things that tend to drive us crazy, but those are not the things that we need to make big deals about. Mm-hmm. And so just being aware of that and trying to keep that in mind, that there are big things, there are really big things, that I think is really important that you address appropriately. If you have a kid that chooses not to obey you and disregards you and is disrespectful all the time, that's something you need to address. Mm-hmm. Like that's a big deal, and that's a kid that's going to grow up and not have an appropriate respect for authority. Right. But like a kid,
you're gonna have to have a good conversation about like just the courses of action for them going forward with that sort of situation. So,
but if you have a kid
I don't think we've had that, but I mean,
leaves out their laundry and doesn't put their like, you're going to have a messy kid, but like they could still be a well-adjusted member of society and adult.
I saw an article that said messy rooms mean you're more intelligent, so I believe it.
Yeah. We'll not talk about it too much. I think to go along with that, the next thing is to consider their heart, right? And that kind of goes right along with what I said as far as like if you have a kid that's doing something to blatantly be disrespectful. But I think, in general, it's important to consider sort of the heart attitude and to do what you can to recognize that. Like with lying, I think our kids are little still. And even though lying is one of the big consequences, the big no-nos in our house, I think it's really important to remember sort of the intent behind, like, why is it that I don't want my kids to lie to me, right? Like, I don't want them to lie because I want them to learn that lying's not a good choice, but I don't want them to lie because I want to have a good relationship with them and I want them to trust me, right? So with that in mind, it should impact the way that I respond to that. And I should be considering the reason that they're lying is not because they don't like me or, it's because it's a natural response to try to hide the bad thing that you did, right? Like, and so considering the fact that they're acting that way out of fear, not out of spite, right? Or, there's a lot of things like that. And I think especially when they're little, it's really easy to be frustrated with some of their behaviors or feel like I might be raising like a criminal if I can't get some of these behaviors under control, right? So it's easy to kind of inflate some of the behaviors that you're seeing. But I think it's really important to think about, and that goes back to kind of what we were talking about with Jamie too. Like, is she doing this behavior because she needs attention? And if that's why she's doing it, what do we need to fix? Like, if she's seeking attention, why are we not giving her what it is that she needs? Because she's a child, right? Or is she growing confidence? Because if she's growing confidence, whatever it is that we're doing, let's nurture that, right? And so, but I think it's really important to kind of think about that and look for the clues to what's going on in your kid's head and in their heart that explains sort of their behaviors and how to better address those. And I think typically when we're thinking about our kid's heart, our response is going to be different, and there may still be punishment or consequence involved in different circumstances because we want our kids to grow up to be healthy adults and respectful adults and whatever adults, right? But when we're giving consequences out of concern for our child's heart condition, I think that just fundamentally changes the way that we interact with them when consequences do have to happen. And I think that's really important, The next is giving multiple chances and forgiving easily. Again, unfortunately, I have to go back to if you are inclined, and some Bible history, like you think about like the idiot Israelites and how many times they did foolish things. Like that is just kind of like, that was, like Israelites do stupid things regularly and forget about the punishment they received yesterday. Like that's just kind of like the whole story of the Old Testament, right?
What? There was a law not to do this? Where was the law?
Right. And so if we as parents are trying to take an example from scripture, the
kids have no idea what the rules are.
Right. And they're going to continue to do the same thing they did yesterday and a year ago. And because that's what they do. Right.
Yeah.
And as I've studied biblical history, there are so many times we just, open the earth, swallow all these idiots, start again with a new nation. For goodness sakes, but then as a parent, you wouldn't do that. Be like, yeah, this kid sucks. Let's just have another one and forget about this one. So certainly you wouldn't really do that as a parent, but there are times when you're looking at a different example that you don't understand that endless patience. And there are times when you're dealing with your own kids that you don't feel that endless patience. Right.
Well, I think we had hard start in the past because like when your caregivers or help comes in like tries to watch kids for you and like the rules change or shift, who's administering, like who's in charge, and that doesn't help your parenting abilities either, because then, well, I had 3 days of this was okay and now I have 4 days of it's not. So if you have a fluctuating home like that sort of situation, because I know what some people have that setting where like they're not the consistent or with their kids consistently enough to be the rule giver all the time, or the rules aren't consistent throughout all of the people that are helping watch your kids.
Right.
So that's definitely something you want to make sure you have at least some strings of consistency, like no lying, and make sure they're obedient, and at least the top 3 rules or something.
And I think the other part of that, forgiving easily, is so important. As a parent, you should not hold a grudge against your kids, period. There may be things that make you feel resentful about something that your kids did. There may be things that are hurtful about what your kids did. But if you are being unforgiving to your child, you need to take a hard look at yourself and figure out what's going on. You're the adult and kids are kids. And we've kind of had that conversation before, and it related to different things. But, you're the adult, kids are kids. There may be times that they do something intentionally to make you irritated, but typically they're a child. And so I think while a consequence may be appropriate, you also need to be overflowing with forgiveness and making sure that they hear that. Always. Always, always, always. So I think that that's really important. The last thing to talk about as far as parenting with grace is just being a fun parent. And we've kind of talked about this a little, but I think, just as important as having clear boundaries and having consistency and knowing what the rules and the expectations are and all of these things, I think the other side of that is to be able to have fun with your kids. Something else that we say a lot is, we want to be a family that plays hard and works hard. In all instances, we want to be a family or we want our kids to look back and remember that we would get on the floor and wrestle with them. We would go, catch frogs and snakes in the creek with them. We would get muddy and messy and let them help in the kitchen and be silly and whatever. But they also respect authority, right? And so sort of that dynamic of I want to play with you. I want to enjoy with you. I want to learn with you. I want to get messy with you, but I also am your parent, and there has to be a level of respect there. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that you figure out what that balance looks like. Because too much of one and not the other, either direction. If you're all fun and no consequence or no rules or boundaries, that also is going to create an issue. And that I think looks very different for different families, for blended families, for single parents, for different things like that line or that dynamic is going to look very different. Mm-hmm. But I think it is literally just as important to talk about consequences and boundaries as it is to talk about the fun.
Yeah, definitely. And that's probably something I struggle with myself, because I'm all about having fun and doing the next fun thing. I'm like, why are we doing schoolwork right now? Let's go outside. It's a nice day. Let's do schoolwork when it's dark and we can't be out there. Or, wait till a rainy day and then we can stay inside and do school. Not that that's a possibility at all. So you just have to find a way to break into those moments. But, and then you want to be able to make sure you can transition yourself from the fun mode to okay, now it's time to really get serious and put these things away, because it is going to rain and we can't leave all the bikes out in the driveway or other things. It shouldn't be happening. And so you have to just find that good balance of, if you're going to be fun and silly, find a good way to make it so you can transition into okay, now we've been having fun, but now the situation is no longer the fun thing. Now we have to go back to okay, we need to clean up and move inside and make sure we're not starving tonight. So,
and you're a good balance for me in that, because I tend to be overly serious, overly, I don't know, in my own head sometimes, overly You know, I'm very much the Martha and the Mary and Martha thing. Like, the most important thing is to work and get all the things done, and then if we have time later, we can have fun or enjoy or whatever. So, so I appreciate that you're a good balance.
But then it's, well, we've all worked hard today. Let's all just go to bed early. And then there's no fun.
That is true, and that is kind of one of the potential reasons that it is so important to make sure that
yesterday, because I was working, everybody had a really long day, and they were all like super like just done at the end of the night. Like I think there was 3 meltdowns with not like people getting angry meltdowns. It was just like they were like tired, broken. It was like they were just crying because of somebody took my slipper, or like I don't have my blanket, and it was like, why are you breaking down? And like they were just ready to sleep. So like I think I turned off. They have a TV in their room right now, and
which we don't usually condone. But we told them during coronavirus they could have a TV in their room because I'm putting them to bed at night while Josh is at work late. So.
Right. Anyway, the situation last night, like I turned it off. I turned off their TV and was like,
good night.
Just go to sleep, lay down. I sang Twinkle Twinkle just because I knew they would hate it. like I'm not trying to irritate you anymore, but I need you to calm down. And so I just wanted to like do something. And so I tried to do that, and like Saya just started crying. Like, I just want to watch a show. I'm like, I understand, buddy, and I'm gonna get out of here. But you guys are you all need to rest because you don't know that you're just squirrely because you're not sleeping.
Yeah.
So they were all wound with just being done for a long day of doing school and getting all their stuff done. So but like I said, it was a weird long day for us. So
I think we really ought to wrap this up. This is a little longer than we typically go.
We've done that twice now.
But that is all the time we have for today. We would love to hear your thoughts about parenting with Grace. Share with us your concerns if this is something you do in your house, and other things that we may have missed. We would love to hear your opinions.
Until the next adventure.
Bye.
Bye.